Right, is everyone able to see my screen here with my PowerPoint? All right,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
audio is
Yep.
coming through well as well.
Yep. I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Just so you know, I am recording this so that people are able to view it later if they couldn't join with us today. So I'm going to go through a presentation and then save some time at the end for questions. So if any questions come up, if you want to just save those to the end, or you can also type them into the chat for reference, and then we'll go through those at the end. But thank you so much for joining us. So I'm here to represent the Friends of Otter Rock Marine Reserve. My name is Taylor Brooks, and I'm our Marine Program Coordinator. So I started with Friends of Otter Rock in 2022 in their first year of programming. I was a volunteer, and then I stepped into this role of program coordinator in February of last year. And so I will be working with all of you as volunteers. So my hope is that after this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of what you can expect from this program. Hopefully get excited about joining us.
We're just going to use one for.
Again, just have a chance to get any questions answered. So I will go ahead and proceed. And again, feel free to throw any questions into the chat. All right. So who are we? So the Otter Rock Marine Reserve was one of the first to be designated. That was in 2012. But all of the Marine Reserves have community teams that do different outreach programs on behalf of that reserve. And we were the last of the reserves to form a group. So in 2020, there was a group of local community members that were all doing different projects, and we're just really excited about conservation in the Otter Rock area. So they decided to join together and form the Friends of Otter Rock. So our mission is the protection and preservation of rocky shore intertidal life, nesting and migrating seabirds and marine mammals that inhabit the Devil's Punch Bowl State Natural Area, the Otter Rock Marine Gardens, Otter Rock Marine Reserve, and the Organ Islands National Wildlife Refuge. All right, and so here is a little sample of the area. So if you're not familiar, this is the Devil's Punch Bowl. So this is kind of the most iconic spot that most people will recognize and associate with Otter Rock. And then I have a map here on the right. So this kind of just shows you a layout of the area. And then that big red star in the middle is where this program is located. So we typically operate the volunteer program at the Devil's Punch Bowl Overlook in particular. And in case you're not familiar with Oregon Marine Reserves, I will share a little bit about that. So there are 5 of them along the Oregon coast. We're right here in the middle. And these are areas where there's no take of any living organisms. So no fishing or foraging or collecting, as well as no ocean development. So they were started to be these really great conservation and research tools. So the first goal is that they will conserve marine habitats and biodiversity. There is an incredible variety in the diversity of habitats at the different 5 marine reserves. And then they also serve as living laboratories for researchers to learn more about our nearshore ocean environment. So these long-term studies are all run by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. They manage the reserves themselves. So they do different monitoring to see the effects of these protected areas and just keep an eye on different changes over time. And then they were also selected very intentionally, working with our local communities to avoid significant adverse impacts to ocean users and our local coastal communities. So here at the Otter Rock Marine Reserve, it is the smallest of the 5 marine reserves in Oregon. It comes in at an area of about 1.2 square miles total. And so I have a map here on the left so you can kind of see, but the boundaries are aligned with some of those offshore islands. So the very north boundary is Gull Rock. So that is this rock, and I'm actually going to go back to show you. It's the rock that's just to the north of the Devil's Punch Bowl. That's directly west of Otter Crest. And then the reserve extends south all the way past Otter Rock, past Beverly Beach to a smaller rock called Whaleback Rock. So those two boundaries give you a really good visual definition of the area that's protected. And even though it's a small area, there is a huge variety of habitats within that zone. So there's the rocky intertidal area, and a lot of that was already protected as part of the Otter Rock Marine Gardens as well. There's some really robust patches of kelp beds, which is really special because those are in decline. There's a lot of sandy bottom areas that creates a great spot to surf also, and some different offshore islands that provide really great habitat for different species. And it's also a pretty shallow area. So because of that, historically, there is pretty low fishing pressure at Otter Rock, especially compared to the other marine reserve sites. And then also because of that shallow nature, ODFW isn't able to do some of the surveys that they do at other reserves, like the hook and line surveys, for example. So they primarily monitor using scuba surveys and underwater video landers, as well as some different intertidal surveys. So what might you expect to see at Otter Rock? There's a whole variety of wildlife that we're so lucky to be able to view there. The first is a really rich rocky intertidal zone. So again, most of that is within the Marine Garden Zone. So that's just north, well, in the Punch Bowl in north. And you can see all kinds of different tide pools and different invertebrates out there. Also towards the north near Otter Crest, harbor seals in particular really like to haul out in that area. And as we're coming up on pupping season, that's definitely a huge point of concern, is just keeping them safe, making sure they're not disturbed and not separated from pups. And then another huge point of attraction to the Otter Rock area are those gray whales that migrate through, and then our resident population that stays around Depot Bay. So we're really lucky to see them there all the time, and they come in so close. They'll feed right around those offshore islands. And on clear days, I've never been at Otter Rock without seeing one. So that's pretty special, and just something that visitors get so excited about seeing too. And then another huge one are shorebirds and seabirds that nest there along some of those cliffs and offshore islands. So in this photo here, I have a black oyster catcher. That's one of our favorites, and a really important species to us because there is a pair that nests there right at the Devil's Punch Bowl that we always monitor also. So these are all animals that you can expect to see regularly when you're doing shifts at the Punch Bowl, as well as others. We see a lot of eagles and a lot of other exciting wildlife. So this is the motivation for why this program is so important to us. So Otter Rock, I'm sure, as you know, receives really heavy visitation really all year round now, but especially during the summer. And that definitely has consequences for all of that wildlife that's there, and definitely a lot of concerns for visitor safety also. So there's a lot of messaging that we feel is really important to get across as an organization. The first one is just the importance of giving those nesting birds their space. They're really susceptible to disturbance when they're building their nests and laying eggs and rearing chicks. So it's really important that they are given space to be able to do that safely. Again, definitely important messaging about the harbor seals in particular. Just reminding people not to get too close to them. I know, a lot of times people are, want to get close to take photos. And so just to remind them of that safe distance. And then also reiterating that sometimes pups are left on the beach while moms might be out foraging or something. And that's not necessarily a stranding situation and not something that we want to intervene in. We just want to guide them to the correct resources to inform about things like that. And then also just a big safety concern is the really fragile nature of those cliffs. So it can be really tempting for people to climb over the fences and check out the rim of the punch bowl and different sandstone areas, but the fences are definitely there for a reason, and the sandstone can crumble away so easily. In fact, this last week that I was there on low tide, we noticed a whole new part of the punch bowl, part of the arch that you walk through. A big part of that has recently just fallen down. So just an example of how that's always changing and definitely not safe to be climbing on. And then there's just other safety concerns that people might not be familiar with. So things like keeping an eye on sneaker waves, and sometimes visitors just aren't aware of things like changing tides when they're going to check out the tide pools. So it's always important that we can communicate that with them. And then also just mentioning how the tide pools are a really fragile ecosystem, especially when they get so much visitation in the summer and can be susceptible to trampling. We just try to connect with people to really encourage responsible visitorship and kind of instill that stewardship principle in people. So this is where you all would come in as a volunteer. So, we're a pretty small organization, and we just really could not have this impact without such a great team of volunteers helping us spread the word in the summer. So our Interpretive Volunteer Program was designed especially to kind of communicate those messages that I talked about. And hopefully through doing that, we are able to help mitigate some of those impacts of having an area with so many visitors. So something we always try to emphasize is that we're not there to enforce rules. Even though there are a lot of different restrictions like no drones and all of the marine reserve restrictions, it's really not our role to enforce those. But rather we hope to just generate awareness and inspire stewardship in visitors. And there's a variety of different interpretive techniques that we use to connect with people. So those are things that you would definitely receive training on. But it's really just the idea of kind of appealing to people's emotions, and instead of just kind of dumping scientific knowledge on them, really more just connecting with visitors and allowing them to make some kind of deep connection with that environment. And then they're more likely to walk away with those ideas of stewardship as well. And then just to kind of demonstrate our impact, last year in our volunteer program, our really excellent team was able to interact with over 3,800 visitors throughout the summer. So that just kind of demonstrates this really awesome ripple effect that we're able to have through having a presence there. And so now I thought I would turn it over to a former volunteer. So Lori is one of our wonderful volunteers that has joined us for multiple years. So if she's on the call, I was hoping she would hop on and share a little bit of information about her experience.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if some of you guys are also former volunteers or not, but I love doing this. I've been doing it. This will be my third year. Prior to doing it here with Otter Rock, I was a volunteer at the Marine Reserve at Cape Perpetua. So it was in Yachats. I live in Lincoln City. I enjoyed it. It was a much longer drive. It's a much way bigger marine reserve, but basically it was still the same thing. We would talk about the marine reserve, and then you talk about the black oyster catchers because they had some nesting pairs there as well. And then when this marine reserve opened up an opportunity to volunteer, I jumped on it, and I have loved it ever since. I talked to people about it. I also volunteer at Hatfield. But this is a summer thing that I very much look forward to. You're going to meet people from all over the world. I met a guy a couple of years ago, or maybe it was just this last year, from Scotland. And I said, I've never been to Scotland, but I kind of waved out to the ocean, and I said, but I envision it kind of looking like this. And he said, oh yes, I'm not going to imitate his accent because I can't. But he said, oh yes, very much. He goes, except we get snow mixed in with everything. And I said, oh, okay, well, we don't. And I'm very, very fortunate that we don't. I don't know. I mean, Taylor is great to work with. There's a couple other great people that a couple have come and gone. But I don't know. I love working with Taylor. She, at least at the beginning, I know she'll kind of shadow people and really help out when you're first out there. But for the most part, sometimes it can be maybe a little awkward approaching groups of people. But I will tell you, in almost every case, like she said, almost every shift I've gone, there have been whales. You're going to experience a variety of weather. Our summers here, we had a great summer last year. We had very little fog. There have been days it has been so foggy. I mean, you can't even from the top, can't even see inside the punch bowl. That was a rarity. People are curious. The number one question I get, and it's not related necessarily to the Marine Reserve, is they point down into the punch bowl and they go, how do I get in there? And so, it gives me an opportunity to talk about the tide. And believe it or not, there are people from elsewhere in this country that don't even know what a tide is. So you get the opportunity to explain that and talk about that. Where's the restroom? Get to tell that a lot. And how do I get down to the beach? And so, it's a good opportunity to tell people not to jump over the cliff, because it is shocking how many people really want to. It's also a little surprising, and Taylor was there when this happened, how many people stand in front of the sign that says drones prohibited, doing a drone, whatever that, it was a kid, I think he was a teenager. And he just, he didn't know, he had his back to the sign. And like Taylor said, we don't enforce the rules, but we certainly take an opportunity to talk about it. Sometimes you'll see, a couple of times I've seen the pair of black oyster catchers. You hear their screams, you look up, and they're both of them chasing a drone. So in that case, you really, want to see if you can figure out where that drone operator is. Because when both birds leave the nest, it's trouble for the eggs or the chicks, depending what phase they're in. So, yeah, it's just a pleasure to do this every single week. So I will continue doing it. And yeah, I'd love to see some of you guys out there. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lori.
You're welcome.
Awesome description. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. All right. Hopefully you can all see this.
Yep.
Okay, great. Awesome. So now to just kind of get into some of those program logistics as we wrap up here. So the volunteer schedule runs from May through early September. So kind of Memorial Day to Labor Day is what we consider our peak season that we have our program. And the time commitment is 1 2-hour shift per week. So we're definitely willing to be flexible. I totally understand people have vacations and summer things going on. Also, some volunteers, if they do have a little bit more of a commute or something, they'll opt to do like 2 shifts every other week or something just to make it easier. Whatever works for you, we're super happy to work with. And then we do really want to focus coverage on weekends and holidays as much as possible. Those are extra busy. But again, it's just kind of always busy at Otter Rock in the summer. So we definitely have some people scheduled during the week as well, as much as schedules will allow. And so here's a sample of what that schedule looks like. So we try to have coverage between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., especially during the weekend, and then as many weekdays are as possible. And so kind of what that shift looks like is that you'll get there, and if you're the first person on that day, you'll get your materials from a little storage area right there at Otter Rock. And we have, we'll provide you with like a bright green vest for visibility so people can, hopefully flag that you're a volunteer. as well as a backpack with different materials, so things like field guides and binoculars for people to use. And then we also have a spotting scope that's available for you to use. So that's a really great opportunity to set it up on things like the birds or the seals that people might not know are there, and then they can get a closer look is always really fun. But that's just totally up to you if you're comfortable using it or want to use it some days or not, whatever you prefer. And then during the shift for that 2 hours, you're kind of just roaming around, connecting with people. So a lot of times they'll come up in groups and, be looking for something in particular, whether it's the tide pool or the punch bowl, or asking about whales. We're definitely there to kind of help direct people. And then that's usually a really good conversation starter. And then you can share some information about the reserve or point out if there are whales or something like that. And then it just kind of goes from there. Usually once you are chatting with one group, other people will notice that you're there as, an interpreter and then engage with you. So it's kind of up to you how much you want to wander around. I usually stay kind of directly in front of the punch bowl unless we do have some oyster catchers nesting on the other side. Sometimes I'll kind of wander over there to point that out to people too. And then at the end of your shift, if there's another person after you, you'll just hand your stuff off to them directly. Or if you're the last one for the day, then you can just put it back in the storage area. So I usually try to get the schedules going a couple weeks in advance. So I'll just be in communication with everyone. Some people kind of do a regular time slot every week. Some people like to shift around a little bit. So we'll just kind of work that out and send it out so that everyone's aware of if there's someone before or after them. And then as far as volunteer training, I did just want to mention that this program is open to people of all different experience levels. So if you're an expert in some sort of, particular area of marine science, that's great. We'd love to have you. If you don't have any experience in interpretation or marine science or biology or anything, that's really awesome too. And we'd be so happy to train you. So we'll have an in-person training session, and that will start with a lot of these topics listed here. So really focusing on those ones that we do kind of communicate about most often. So things like the seabirds and marine mammals. Again, like safety is really important. You'll get trained on being comfortable using those binoculars and spotting scopes and showing visitors how to use them. And then just a variety of other things that you might get questions about. So things like geology and tribal and cultural history of the area. And I'm open to including anything else. So please let me know if there are topics that you would like more training on, or maybe, you volunteered in the past and felt like you were really getting a lot of questions about one thing and you want more information. I'm happy to include that. So the next steps will be that tomorrow I will send out an email to everyone for volunteer registration. So that will be another Google form that you'll fill out. So that will be signing up for the program as well as this in-person training session. So that is scheduled for Sunday, May 19th. So it's the weekend before we're launching the program. It'll be at Otter. So there's a community center there that we use. So we'll do in-person training 1 to 4 and kind of get talks from some local experts and also have a site visit where we kind of explore the area and I can point out some different things to you. So if you would fill out that registration, that would be awesome. Even if you're not able to attend this first training, you're still welcome to join. And I would love if you could fill that out and just let me know, and I could definitely get you information otherwise. And then we're hoping this year to kind of follow that up with some additional training opportunities. So some cross training with some of our other partner organizations are available, as well as some different events throughout the season. So hopefully we can kind of tailor things to special topics that you're interested in if you really want more of a deeper dive. So we'll be launching that program that following weekend on Memorial Day. And I'm hoping that I can get everyone signed up for the shift that they're kind of hoping to stick with during that first week. And then I usually start with shadowing you at that first shift. So you can kind of get the ropes, and I can kind of show you some of my techniques I try to use to engage with people and answer any questions you might have. And then I'm happy to continue to do that as much as anyone needs. And then once you're ready to be on your own, you'll just kind of show up for your shift and just, might cross paths with other visitors and volunteers coming and going. And then just really quickly, this is my last thing. I did want to mention some other opportunities we have to get involved. So in addition to this volunteer program, we also do a lot of other community science. So these are all different coast-wide community science projects that we take part in. The first one is marine debris monitoring. So this is part of a global NOAA project, and we do this one year round. We'll go down to the beach and gather debris and take some data about what we're finding. As low tides allow, we also do sea star surveys every month. So this is part of a study that was established by the Marine Lab, and really motivated by sea star wasting disease and kind of keeping an eye on that. So we go out during the low tides and survey sea stars in particular plots, and just see how our local population is doing and check for any signs of disease. And then we also do black oyster catcher nest monitoring. So that is part of a statewide project with Bird Alliance of Oregon, formerly Portland Audubon. And we monitor a pair of oyster catchers that nest every year at the Devil's Punch Bowl, particularly. We've watched them many years in a row, and it was a while since they had a successful nest until this last year. We were monitoring, and they were able to fledge a couple of chicks, which is really exciting. So that's always a fun project to help out with, because you get really invested in this one couple of bird success throughout the season. So these are all surveys that we're always happy to take volunteers for. So if you're more interested in the science side of things rather than the interpretation, this would be a great fit. Or if you just want to join one time and you're not able to commit to like the weekly commitment of the volunteer program, these are all other options to get involved too. So please reach out if that's something you're interested in. But otherwise, I have my contact information listed down here below. So you can reach out via email if you have any questions. Definitely keep an eye on your inbox. I'll be sending out that volunteer registration link. And then you can also get more information about the Otter Rock Marine Reserve and who we are as a group at our website at friendsofotterrock.org. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'm happy to stay on the call, and please just feel free to jump in if you have any questions, or anything else that you'd like to know about the program. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you don't have questions, you're welcome to hop off the call whenever. And then I think I have some of our other board members on as well. So if anyone wanted to jump on and say anything that didn't get hit in the presentation, feel free to do so. But otherwise, again, please reach out via email if you have any questions or comments or anything.
Okay. Oh, no questions now?
Oh, you can ask now if you have questions.
Yes. I
Yeah.
have two questions. So, where do the volunteers park their cars at? They volunteer for the.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, parking does get tough in the summer, especially on weekends or really good surf days. So parking is just kind of first come, first serve. There is kind of a little bit of like a secret lot that's behind the coffee shop that's right there close to the punch bowl. So that's usually my best bet to grab a spot in there, because most people don't know that it's public parking. Otherwise, a lot of people come and go, so it's definitely possible to get parking in the two main parking lots by the bathrooms. And then there's kind of overflow on some of the residential streets, but just being really mindful of not parking in people's yards and things like that.
So how far would you have to walk to to the volunteer site
So if you're able to park at that lot behind the coffee shop, it's super
Uh-huh.
short. It's like right there. It can be a couple minutes walk if you do have to park a little bit further down. So it just kind of
Okay.
depends.
Okay. Second question, the Marine Reserves,
Mhm.
they're still going on, I understand, but you don't hear any information. What the status is with them? Are they successful or what's going on with them? Can you just give me a
Yeah.
brief?
Yeah,
Maybe
so they were, this has been a really big year for the Marine Reserves. They were
okay,
just up for review. They just had their 10-year review. So that was a
okay,
chance to kind of figure out, are we keeping them? Are there going to be more or less? Are they working or
okay,
not? So there was an assessment and it's gone through legislation and we were able to pass, keep them, keep the 5 that we have now. Unfortunately, at some point during that process, ODFW, who is the organization that does like the actual monitoring at the Marine Reserves, they had some of their team cut, and so their capacity to gather that data and communicate that was a little bit limited. But then recently, a bill passed that has reinstated that funding for them to expand that team. So we're hoping to get a lot more communication from them moving forward about updated data, how things are looking.
okay.
So far, it's been really positive, but because it is intended to be more of a long-term conservation tool, it's kind of like too soon to say what the real long-term impacts will be.
But they're going to keep them intact until.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, they're going to keep them intact. They're not
yes,
going to cancel them out already. Okay.
right. Yep, they
Okay.
were allowed to stay after this 10-year review.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
yeah, great question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just don't hear much about them.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely kind of depends on where you are and they do different studies with them in collaboration with some different labs at both Oregon State and the University of Oregon. So I definitely think there's a lot of studies kind of on the way that hopefully we'll hear more about soon.
Okay. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. I'm all talked out. So
No problem. I will
thanks for
stay
the opportunity.
on.
And I um well, I have more questions, but they'll come later on.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely send you an email to connect.
Okay.
Thanks, Taylor.
You're so welcome. Thanks again for
Take
joining.
care. We'll see you around.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Last chance for any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to end the meeting.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Amelia. All right. Thanks, everyone. Look out for that email.